tell me another story. Hello. Today's story is about a turnip. T-U-R-N-I-P. Turnip. A turnip is a vegetable, and this particular turnip was very unusual. Once upon a time, there were two brothers called Stephen and Sidney. They were both farmers.
I'm a farmer.
And I'm a farmer.
Stephen, the elder brother, was very rich.
I'm very rich.
And Sidney, the younger brother, was very poor.
I'm very poor.
Stephen lived on a large farm.
I live on a large farm.
And Sidney and his wife lived on a small farm.
We live on a small farm.
Sidney's wife, Emily, planted some turnips.
There, I've planted some turnips.
And after a while, the turnips began to grow. But one turnip grew bigger than all the others. It grew and it grew. The turnip grew and grew until it was enormous. Sidney and Emily looked at it.
That's an enormous turnip.
I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a turnip as big as that before.
What are we going to do with it?
We better pull it up.
So Emily pulled at the turnip. But it wouldn't come out of the ground.
It won't come out of the ground.
So Emily asked Sidney to come and help her.
Sidney, come and help me.
Right.
Sidney took hold of Emily, and Emily took hold of the turnip.
Now, when I say pull, pull. 1, 2, 3, pull!
And they both pulled. But the turnip wouldn't come out of the ground.
It won't come out of the ground.
So Sidney asked a neighbour, Mr. Jones, to help.
Come and help us.
Right.
So Mr. Jones took hold of Sidney, and Sidney took hold of his wife, and his wife took hold of the turnip.
Now, when I say pull, pull. 1, 2, 3, pull!
And they all pulled. But the turnip wouldn't come out of the ground.
It won't come out of the ground.
So Mr. Jones asked his wife, Agatha, to help.
Agatha, come and help us.
Yes, all right, dear.
So Mrs. Jones took hold of Mr. Jones, and Mr. Jones took hold of Sidney, and Sidney took hold of Emily.
Now, when I say pull, pull. 1, 2, 3, pull!
And they all pulled. But the turnip wouldn't come out of the ground.
It won't come out of the ground.
And so it went on. More and more neighbours were asked to help, until finally there were 12 of them, all holding on to one another. So they tried again.
Are you ready?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
When I say pull, pull. 1, 2, 3, pull!
And they all pulled. And all of a sudden, the turnip came out of the ground. And then Emily fell back onto Sidney,
Oh!
and Sidney fell back onto Mr. Jones,
Oh!
and Mr. Jones fell back onto Mrs. Jones, and so on, right up to the 12th neighbour, who fell back onto the ground, taking all the others with him. And they all sat and looked at the turnip.
That's a very big turnip.
It's enormous.
What are we going to do with it?
Well, we could eat it.
Seems a pity to eat it. We've got lots of other turnips we can eat.
Well, we could sell it.
Oh, seems a pity to sell it. If we sell it, we won't get much money for it.
So what are we going to do with it?
Then Sidney had an idea.
I've got an idea. I'll give it to the king.
To the king?
Yes, I'll give this turnip to the king as a present.
Emily thought that was a good idea.
That's a good idea.
So Sidney took the turnip to the king.
Your Majesty, I've brought you a present.
A present? Oh, that's very kind of you.
Please accept this turnip.
And the turnip was carried in by the king's servants. The king was amazed.
That's amazing. What an enormous turnip. I've never seen anything like it.
The queen was also amazed.
I've never seen a turnip as big as that before.
The king was very interested.
It's very interesting. It's most unusual. It's very rare. You're a lucky man.
But Sidney told the king that he was not lucky.
No, Your Majesty, I'm not a lucky man.
You're not?
No, Your Majesty, I'm a poor farmer. My elder brother is rich, but my wife and I are very poor. Poor and unlucky. We have almost nothing except this turnip, which we would like you to have.
The king felt sorry for Sidney,
I'm sorry for you.
and he decided to help him.
I'll help you. I'll make you as rich as your brother.
You'll make me as rich as my brother?
Yes, you've given me a present, so now I'm going to give you a present.
And he gave Sidney some gold and some jewels.
Take this gold and these jewels.
Sidney was amazed and delighted.
Your Majesty, I'm amazed and delighted. Thank you, thank you.
Not at all. Thank you for your present. Goodbye.
Goodbye, Your Majesty, and thank you.
And Sidney went home happily with the gold and the jewels. After Sidney had gone, the king and queen sat and looked at the turnip.
It was nice of him to give us this, wasn't it?
Yes, wasn't it?
It is an enormous turnip.
Yes, enormous.
I've never seen a turnip as big as that before.
Neither have I.
It's very rare, you know.
Yes, very unusual.
My dear,
Yes, my dear?
what are we going to do with it?
And now some practice. Sidney's wife Emily planted some turnips. One of the turnips grew very big indeed. In fact, it was enormous. Sidney and his wife looked at it and said, "You repeat."
That's an enormous turnip. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a turnip as big as that before.
Emily said,
We'd better pull it up.
she tried to pull the turnip up, but it wouldn't come out of the ground. She said,
It won't come out of the ground.
Emily asked Sidney to help her. She said,
Come and help me.
so Sidney helped her, but the turnip still wouldn't come out of the ground. They asked the neighbors to help them, and they pulled up the enormous turnip. Then Sidney said,
What are we going to do with it?
and Emily said,
We could eat it. We could sell it.
and Sidney said,
It seems a pity to eat it. It seems a pity to sell it.
Then Sidney had an idea. He said,
I'll give it to the king.
So Sidney took the turnip to the king. He said to the king,
I've brought you a present.
and the king said,
That's very kind of you.
The king and queen were amazed at the size of the turnip. The king said,
It's very interesting. It's most unusual. It's very rare.
and the king gave Sidney some gold and jewels. And now, back to the story. Sidney went home with the gold and jewels. When he got home, he told his wife that the king had given him a present.
The king gave me a present.
A present? Oh, that was nice of him.
Then Sidney showed his wife the gold and jewels.
Look, gold and jewels
Gold! Jewels! From the king!
from the king. Aren't we lucky?
Aren't we lucky?
They were very happy.
Hooray!
When Sidney's elder brother Stephen heard about this, he was furious.
Now he's richer than I am. Where did he get all that money?
So he went to his brother and asked him where he'd got his money from.
Where did you get your money from?
I got it from the king.
From the king?
Yes, I gave him a present, and he gave me a present.
Stephen wanted to know what sort of present Sidney'd given the king.
What sort of present did you give him?
I gave him a turnip.
Stephen was very surprised.
A turnip? A turnip?
Yes, I gave him an enormous turnip.
Stephen thought that he could do better than that,
I can do better than that.
and he thought about it.
The king gave my brother gold and jewels just for a turnip. If I give the king a better present, he'll give me much more.
So Stephen went to see the king, taking with him some gold and jewels.
Your Majesty, I've brought you a present.
The king was pleased.
A present? Oh, that's very kind of you.
He wondered what the present was.
I wonder what the present is.
He hoped it wasn't another turnip.
I hope it's not another turnip.
Then Stephen gave the king his present.
Your Majesty, please accept this gold and these jewels.
The king was very pleased.
Gold! Jewels! That's wonderful. Thank you very much.
The king decided to give Stephen a present.
I must give him a present.
He said quietly to the queen,
I must give him a present.
A present?
Yes, he's given me a present, so I'd like to give him one. But what am I going to give him? He's given me gold and jewels, so I can't give him that.
and then the queen had an idea,
I've got an idea.
and she spoke quietly to her husband.
Yes. Ah,
And the king spoke to Stephen.
I would like to give you a present.
A present? Oh, Your Majesty.
Stephen wondered what the king would give him.
I wonder what he'll give me. Gold, silver, more jewels.
I'm going to give you something very rare and very unusual.
Very rare and very unusual. Oh, Your Majesty, that's very kind of you.
My servants will bring in the present.
And the servants brought in the present.
Please accept this turnip.
And the king gave Stephen the enormous turnip. And that's the end of the story. Goodbye. Tell me another story. Hello. Today's story is about a miller. M-I-L-L-E-R. A miller who worked in a mill grinding flour to make bread. Once upon a time, there was a miller.
Oh, yes.
He owned a mill. He worked at the mill with his pretty daughter, Mary.
La-la-la.
And with another worker, Arthur.
Who are?
The miller was a happy man. Until one day, the king came riding by.
Hello.
Hello, Your Majesty.
Are you the miller?
Yes, Your Majesty.
And then the trouble started.
Is this your mill?
Yes, Your Majesty.
It's a very good mill.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
I like it.
Thank you, Your Majesty.
I want it.
What?
I want your mill.
But, Your Majesty.
I'm the king. I want your mill and all the flour.
But
I'm a reasonable man. I like to give a man a chance. I'll ask you 3 questions, and if you can answer the 3 questions by the end of the year, you can keep the mill. Is that a bargain?
yes, it's a bargain. What are the questions?
So the king told the miller what the questions were.
The first question is, how long does it take to go round the earth?
How long does it take to go round the earth?
Yes. And the second question is, how many stars are there in the sky?
How many stars are there in the sky?
Yes. And the third question is, what am I thinking?
What am I thinking?
No. Not what are you thinking? What am I thinking? What am I, the king, thinking?
Oh, yes, I understand, Your Majesty.
I'll give you a year and a day to find out the answers to those questions.
A year and a day. Yes, Your Majesty.
I'll come back in a year and a day, and if you can't answer those questions, I'll take your mill and all the flour as well.
And the king rode away. The miller was in despair.
Oh, what am I going to do? I don't know the answers to those questions. The king will come back in a year's time, and if I can't answer the questions, he's going to take the mill away from me. Oh, what am I going to do?
So the days went by, and the weeks went by, and the miller thought about the 3 questions.
How long does it take to go round the earth? Well, how should I know? How many stars are there in the sky? I'll never manage to count them all. And what is the king thinking? I mean, how on earth should I know that?
And as the months went by, the miller got more and more worried.
Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear.
After a while, the miller's daughter Mary began to notice that her father was very worried indeed.
Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear.
And she asked him what the matter was.
What's the matter, Father?
Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear. No, nothing, Mary.
But Mary didn't believe her father.
I don't believe you. I know there's something wrong. Father, please tell me what the matter is.
And at last, the miller told his daughter what the matter was.
Well, it's like this.
Yes?
The king wants the mill.
What?
The king wants to take the mill away from me.
He wants to take the mill away from you?
He wants to take the mill away from us, and the flour as well, unless
Unless what?
I can answer 3 questions.
3 questions? Well, that can't be too difficult. What are you worrying about?
Wait till you hear the questions.
What are they?
And the miller told his daughter what the questions were.
Well, the first question is, how long does it take to go round the earth?
How long does it take to go round the earth? How should I know?
And the second question is, how many stars are there in the sky?
How many stars are there in the sky? Has anyone ever counted them all?
And the third question is, what am I thinking?
What are you thinking? Well, you ought to know that.
No, not what am I thinking. What is the king thinking?
But that's ridiculous. How can you know what the king is thinking?
I don't know. Of course I don't know what the king is thinking, but the king said he'd come back in a year's time, and if I don't know the answer to all three questions, he'll take the mill away from me. And the year is nearly over, and I don't know the answers.
Oh, that's terrible.
I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear.
Now, there was another man who worked at the mill, remember? His name was Arthur.
Who are?
The miller's daughter went to see Arthur.
Arthur, we're in trouble.
In trouble, eh?
The king wants to take the mill away from us.
The king wants to take the mill away from you, eh?
The king is coming back here very soon, and if my father can't answer 3 questions, the king will take the mill away from us.
Arthur thought for a moment.
What are the 3 questions?
So Mary told Arthur what the 3 questions were.
The first question is, how long does it take to go round the earth?
How long does it take to go round the earth? Oh.
And the second question is, how many stars are there in the sky?
How many stars are there in the sky? Oh.
And the third question is, what am I thinking?
What am I thinking? Oh. I'm thinking that those are 3 silly questions.
No, Arthur, not what are you thinking? What am I thinking?
Well, what are you thinking?
No, Arthur, not what am I thinking. What is the king thinking?
Oh, what is the king thinking? Oh,
Do you know the answers?
well...
Mary hoped that Arthur could help.
Oh, Arthur, please help us. If you can save the mill, I'll do anything you want.
Arthur thought about this.
Anything I want, eh?
Anything, if you can save the mill.
Arthur thought about this for a while.
I'll make a bargain with you.
A bargain? What sort of a bargain?
If I can save the mill, will you marry me?
Oh. Arthur, I'll do anything. Yes, it's a bargain. If you can save the mill, I'll marry you.
And now some practice. The king came to see the mill. He liked the mill. He said to the miller, "You repeat."
I want your mill and all the flour.
The king wanted the miller to answer 3 questions. He asked,
How long does it take to go round the earth? How many stars are there in the sky? What am I thinking?
the miller said,
If I can't answer the questions, he'll take the mill away from me.
The miller told his daughter Mary what the questions were. He said,
I don't know the answers. I don't know what I'm going to do.
So Mary asked Arthur, who worked at the mill, to help. And Arthur said,
I'll make a bargain with you. If I can save the mill, will you marry me?
and Mary agreed. And now, back to the story. Arthur went to see the miller. The miller was, as usual, very worried.
Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear.
Arthur asked him what the matter was.
What's the matter?
Oh, nothing. Oh, dear, oh, dear, oh, dear.
Oh, yes, there is something the matter, and I know what it is.
You do?
Yes, I know what the matter is. You have to answer the 3 questions that the king asks you, and if you can't answer the questions, the king will take the mill away from you.
That's right. How did you know that?
Mary told me.
Oh,
I have a plan. I think I can help you.
you can?
And Arthur told the miller his plan.
Let me change places with you.
You change places with me?
Yes, I'll pretend to be the miller. I'll put on your hat and your clothes, and I'll try to answer the questions.
You will? Oh, thank you.
Soon the year was over, and it was time for the king to come back. Arthur put on the miller's clothes and his hat, and he put some flour on his hair to make him look older.
There. I'll put on the miller's clothes and his hat, and now I'll put some flour on my hair to make me look older.
So Arthur put some flour on his hair, which made it white, and he looked much older. And soon the king came riding by.
Hello!
Hello, Your Majesty.
When the king saw Arthur with the miller's clothes and hat on and with white hair, he thought he was the miller.
You look older than when I last saw you.
I'm getting very old.
Yes, your hair's gone quite white. Well, do you know the answers to those 3 questions?
Well, they're very difficult, Your Majesty.
Yes, they are difficult, aren't they?
They're very difficult, but I'll try to answer them.
And the king asked the first question.
Here's the first question. How long does it take to go round the earth?
How long does it take to go round the earth?
Yes. What's the answer?
It will take you 24 hours to travel round the earth if you travel with the sun.
The king thought about the answer.
24 hours if I travel with the sun. Oh, very clever. Yes, very clever. Well done.
Then the king asked the second question.
Here's the second question. How many stars are there in the sky?
How many stars are there in the sky?
Yes. What's the answer?
1 million.
The king was surprised.
1 million? How do you know that? I don't believe it.
Oh, well, if you don't believe me, count them and see. 1 million.
The king thought about it,
Yes.
and he asked the third question.
Here's the third question. What am I thinking?
What are you thinking?
Yes, what am I thinking?
Oh, well, you're thinking that I'm the miller, but I'm not. I'm Arthur, who works at the mill.
And Arthur took off the miller's hat and shook the flour out of his hair, and the king could see that he wasn't the miller.
Oh, now I can see that you're not the miller. Yes, but you have answered the 3 questions.
The king thought for a moment. And then he laughed.
Well done. I won't take the mill.
So the king didn't take the mill away from the miller. And Arthur married Mary. And Mary,
La la la.
and Arthur,
Who are?
and the miller
Oh, yes.
all lived happily ever after. And that's the end of the story. Goodbye.
Quick Papers. Episode 1.
Samuel Pickwick, Tracy Tupman, Augustus Snodgrass, and Nathaniel Winkle are hereby appointed members of the Corresponding Society of the Pickwick Club. They are requested to put forward from time to time accounts of their journeys and investigations, their observations of character and manners, and the whole of their adventures to the Pickwick Club stationed in London.
We present The Pickwick Papers, being the story of Mr. Samuel Pickwick, his friends, his travels, and his adventures. Episode 1. The members of the Pickwick Club set out on their travels.
It was the morning of the 13th of May, 1827, and the sun had just risen on the streets of London when a stout, elderly gentleman with a bald head and round spectacles on his nose looked out of his bedroom window at the world below.
Ah, today's the day.
The elderly gentleman was Mr. Samuel Pickwick. His eyes twinkled with pleasure behind the glasses of his round spectacles, and his bald head shone.
Today, I set out on my travels.
So saying, Mr. Pickwick went downstairs and spoke to his landlady.
Today is the day, Mrs. Bardell. The day I set out on my travels.
Do you think it is wise, Mr. Pickwick? Or safe? A gentleman of your age, travelling round England by coach and carrying only a leather bag, a telescope, and a notebook?
Well, Mrs. Bardell, the chairman and founder of the Pickwick Club must be prepared for adventure.
Yes, Mr. Pickwick.
In any case, I am in no danger. I shall be travelling with 3 other members of the Pickwick Club, Mr. Tupman, Mr. Winkle, and Mr. Snodgrass. They, I am sure, will keep me safe from harm.
Will you be away long, Mr. Pickwick?
I am afraid I cannot tell you, for we have made no definite plans, except to see what adventures we can find.
Adventures? What sort of adventures?
Who knows? We shall have to wait and see what happens to us.
But what will you do with these adventures, Mr. Pickwick, when you found them?
Why, write them down, of course, and send the descriptions back to the members of the Pickwick Club here in London. They, I hope, will publish them as a series of papers. Perhaps we shall call them the Pickwick Papers. But time is getting on, and I must go. Otherwise, I shall be late for my meeting with my fellow travellers. Cab! Cab!
Right you are, sir. Cab here, sir. Come in, sir.
Where to? Take me to Golden Cross, please. I'm going on a journey, and my coach leaves from there.
Get in.
How much is the fare, my good fellow?
Only a bob's worth.
Oh, a shilling, eh?
Yes, sir. A bob. Up. Giddy up there, horse.
How old is that animal, my friend?
42.
What? As old as that? How astonishing. I must write that interesting fact down in my notebook. A horse, 42 years old. And how long does he work at a time?
Oh, 2 or 3 weeks.
2 or 3 weeks?
Yes, then I takes him back to the stable and feeds him.
How extraordinary. A horse fed not more than once every 2 or 3 weeks.
I don't often take him home on account of his weakness.
His weakness? What weakness?
He always falls down when we takes him out the cab, you see. It's only the cab what holds him up. He couldn't hardly walk if he wasn't fastened tight to the cab. And when he does move, the large wheels run after him. That makes him go, you see.
How remarkable.
Mr. Pickwick went on asking questions and writing the answers down in his notebook. It did not occur to Mr. Pickwick's innocent mind that the cabman might not be telling him the truth. He also did not notice that the cabman was becoming angry. In fact, the more Mr. Pickwick wrote in his notebook, the angrier the cabman became.
Ah, here we are. Now, cabman, your fare. 1 shilling, I think you said. There you are.
Shilling, eh? Well, there, that's what I think of your shilling. And now perhaps you'll fight me for it.
Fight you? What on earth for?
Come on, come on. Take that. Oh, and that.
Mr. Pickwick was astonished. Why was the cabman so angry? The next minute, his spectacles were knocked off his nose and several blows were landed on his body. Mr. Pickwick's first adventure had begun.
Mr. Samuel Pickwick, the chairman and founder of the Pickwick Club, is setting out on his travels. Before leaving, he talks to his landlady and housekeeper, Mrs. Bardell.
We have made no definite plans, except to see what adventures we can find.
Mrs. Bardell wants to know more.
But what will you do with these adventures, Mr. Pickwick, when you found them?
Why, write them down, of course, and send the descriptions back to the members of the Pickwick Club here in London. They, I hope, will publish them as a series of papers. Perhaps we shall call them the Pickwick Papers.
Mr. Pickwick takes a cab to Golden Cross, the place where he has arranged to meet his friends. In the cab, he immediately begins to take notes. He asks the cabman, the driver of the cab, how old his horse is. The cabman's reply is surprising.
42.
The cabman goes on to tell Mr. Pickwick some remarkable facts about the animal. He says that the horse works for 2 or 3 weeks at a time before he is fed.
2 or 3 weeks. Then I takes him back to the stable and feeds him.
The London cabman, as you will have noticed, doesn't speak standard English. He says,
I takes him. I feeds him.
instead of, I take him. I feed him. The cabman explains why the horse is not taken home very often.
We don't often take him home on account of his weakness.
The horse has a weakness. A weakness, the cabman calls it. The horse falls down when he is not fastened tightly to the cab.
It's only the cab what holds him up. He couldn't hardly walk if he wasn't fastened tight to the cab.
The cabman is joking, but Mr. Pickwick doesn't realize this and writes down everything he is told. When the cabman sees Mr. Pickwick taking notes, he becomes angry and suspicious. When they arrive at their destination, he challenges Mr. Pickwick to a fight. Mr. Pickwick can't understand at first why the cabman is so angry, but he realizes what is wrong when the cabman accuses him of being an informer, someone who is going to report him to the police. Mr. Pickwick is then joined by his friends, Mr. Tupman, Mr. Winkle, and Mr. Snodgrass. A crowd gathers, but luckily Mr. Pickwick and his friends are rescued by a thin young man in a green coat. This young man has an unusual style of speech. He speaks quickly, in short bursts, leaving out any unnecessary words, rather like a telegram.
Now you, cabman, off with you. None of your nonsense. This gentleman, respectable. Know him well. All a mistake.
And now let's return to Mr. Pickwick and the fight with the cabman.
As the cabman continued the fight, half a dozen coachmen gathered round to see the fun, and they were joined by Mr. Tupman, Mr. Winkle, and Mr. Snodgrass.
Mr. Pickwick, what's the trouble?
Oh, thank goodness you've come. He took my number. I didn't take it. He's an informer. He came here in my cab. He wrote down my number in his notebook and every word I said. Every word.
Did he now?
Yes, he did. He's an informer. He's going to report me to the police. I am not an informer. Yes, you are. Now, put up your fists and fight. All of you.
Where's an officer? Send for an officer! Help! Somebody!
To this appeal, there suddenly came a reply from a thin young gentleman standing at the back of the crowd.
Who wants help? We do, sir. We do. Why? What's going on? What's all the fuss?
They're all informers. We are not.
Ain't you, though? Ain't you? Here, make way. Let me through. Now, you cabman, off with you. None of your nonsense. This gentleman, respectable. Know him well. All a mistake. This way, sir. Follow me. Accidents will happen. I never say die. Damn rascal, that cabman.
Yeah,
Take you to safety. Waiting room of the inn. This way. Waiter, gentleman here needs drink. Bring glasses, brandy and water, hot.
The brandy soon arrived, and the stranger drank most of it. While he did, Mr. Pickwick took a closer look at him. The young man was rather tall and thin, and wore an old green coat that looked as if it once belonged to someone of a much smaller size, for there was a split down the back, and the sleeves were too short. But despite his shabby appearance, the stranger had a quite extraordinary air of self-confidence.
We are very grateful to you.
Indeed, most grateful.
Yes, pleased to be of help. But must go now. Rochester coach about to leave. Let you pay for brandy. I can't. No change. Sorry. Enjoyed company. Charming gentleman. Very.
One moment, sir. Did you not say you are catching the Rochester coach?
Yes. Seat booked.
Oh, we too are going to Rochester. Might we travel with you?
Certainly. Pleasure. Great honor. But must hurry. This way. Hope you don't mind seats on outside of coach. Very cold sometimes.
No, of course we don't mind. It's quite comfortable here.
Ah, we're leaving. Hold tight. Heads! Heads! Mind your heads! No archway! Look out!
Ah! Missed it. Thank you, sir, for your warning.
Dangerous, very. Other day, mother, tall lady, eating sandwiches, forgot the arch. Crash, knock. Children look round, mother's head off in roadway. Sandwich in her hand. No mouth to put it in. Shocking, shocking, very.
Dreadful. It makes one realize how frail is the life of man. We live but for a short time and are gone.
True, very true. Beautifully put. Reminds me of my own sad story. Care to hear it?
Yes, if you would not mind telling it.
Love of my life. Donna Cristina, Spanish lady. Jealous father. Forbids marriage. Donna Cristina in despair. Poison. Suicide. Death. Father mad with guilt. Grief unbearable. Disappears. Whole city searched. Father nowhere to be found. Water in fountain suddenly stops flowing. Workmen employed to clean it. Father discovered sticking head first in the main pipe with a full compression in his right boot. Father removed from pipe, and fountain works as well as ever. Strange story. Sad. Very.
Oh, it is sad indeed. Do you mind if I make a note of it?
Of course not. Many more stories. Care to hear them?
Oh, yes, yes, indeed. Yes.
In this way, with the stranger talking and the others scribbling in their notebooks, the coach travelled on towards their destination. What happened when they arrived at Rochester, we will tell you in the next 2.
The story so far.
Mr. Pickwick and his 3 friends have set out on their travels in search of knowledge and adventure. On the coach to Rochester, they have made friends with a shabby young gentleman in a green coat.
The Pickwick Papers, being the story of Mr. Samuel Pickwick, his friends, his travels, and his adventures. Episode 2, A Ball at the Bull Inn.
The coach proceeded on its journey until at last Mr. Pickwick and his friends drew near their destination, Rochester. As they rumbled across Rochester Bridge, the stranger pointed out to Mr. Pickwick one of the local landmarks.
Look, Mr. Pickwick. Old castle. Wonderful ruin. High walls, stone staircases, dark corners. Historical. Very.
What a magnificent building. How inspiring.
Ah, poet, sir?
No, not I. My friend here, Mr. Snodgrass, he has the talent for poetry.
Ah, Mr. Snodgrass, eh? Published, sir? Collected works? Next poet laureate?
No, not yet. But I dare to think that some of my things have a certain merit, a certain romantic power.
Mine too, sir. Romantic, powerful, very.
You write poems too, do you, sir?
Yes, hundreds. Admired by all who read them. Best work, a poem in praise of women's beauty. 1,000 lines, breathtaking, passionate, very.
I should like to read that poem, sir. I too admire feminine beauty.
Mr. Tupman, I must explain, has a fine eye for the charms of a pretty woman.
Have you? I too.
Many conquests, sir?
Conquests? Thousands. Women adore me. Embarrassing. Can't love them all. Try, though. You, sir. Other gentlemen. Sportsman, sir?
Yes, a little. How did you know?
Tell from your coat. Shooting jacket. Obvious.
Ooh, Mr. Winkle has a great reputation in the sporting world. Don't you, Winkle?
Well, Mr. Pickwick, you could say that. Pleased to hear it. Do you keep dogs, sir?
Not just at the moment.
Fine animals. Very clever. Had one once. Ponto, his name. Out shooting one day. Went through a gate. Ponto wouldn't follow. Called him, whistled, wouldn't move. Staring at a board. Notice put up by landowner. Notice said, all dogs trespassing on this land will be shot. Ponto wouldn't pass it. Wonderful dog. Intelligent. Very.
How remarkable. I'll write that down in my notebook.
Good. Lots more stories of the same animal. Ah, here's our destination. The Bull Inn.
Are you staying here, sir?
Here? Not I. But you'd better. Good place. Nice beds. But dear. Expensive. Charge you if you look at the waiter. Extra £1 on the bill. I'll stay next door. Cheaper.
Sir, you helped me when I was in difficulties this morning. I would like to show my thanks. Would you care to have dinner with us?
Great pleasure. Yeah, not presume to dictate, but boiled chicken and mushrooms. Very tasty. What time?
Let me see. Shall we say 5?
Suit me excellently. Till 5, then. All right.
Oh, one moment, sir.
Yeah?
Excuse me for mentioning it, but you appear to have forgotten your luggage. Have you perhaps left it on the coach?
Luggage? Haven't got any. Not with me. Brown paper parcel here, that's all. Rest gone by water. Huge packing cases piled up big as houses. Heavy, damned heavy. Couldn't possibly carry it all with me. Must go now. Care of yourselves. Bye.
The stranger lifted up his worn, pinched-up hat a few inches from his head and walked quickly away, with half the brown paper parcel sticking out of his pocket.
So Mr. Pickwick and his friends have arrived in Rochester. But during the coach journey, their new friend has come to know something about each of them. First, Mr. Snodgrass. Mr. Snodgrass writes poetry as Mr. Pickwick explains.
My friend here, Mr. Snodgrass, he has a talent for poetry.
The stranger immediately asks Mr. Snodgrass if he has published anything, and flatters him by suggesting that he might be the next poet laureate, a poet appointed to write poems for important royal occasions.
Published, sir? Collected works? The next poet laureate?
No, not yet. But I dare to think that some of my things have a certain merit, a certain romantic power.
The stranger reveals that he too writes poems.
Hundreds, admired by all who read them. Best work, a poem in praise of women's beauty. 1,000 lines, breathtaking, passionate, very.
This interests Mr. Tupman, who is always dreaming of romance, in spite of the fact that he is now a stout and not very romantic figure.
I should like to read that poem, sir. I, too, admire feminine beauty.
Mr. Pickwick explains further.
Mr. Tupman has a fine eye for the charms of a pretty woman.
The young man says that he too admires women and has had many conquests. He has made many women fall in love with him.
Conquests? Thousands. Women adore me. Embarrassing. Can't love 'em all. Try, though.
Then the stranger turns his attention to Mr. Winkle, who is wearing a sportsman's coat, a shooting jacket. Mr. Pickwick explains that Mr. Winkle is a well-known sportsman.
Mr. Winkle has a great reputation in the sporting world. Don't you, Winkle?
Winkle is not sure about this, but doesn't like to deny it.
Well, Mr. Pickwick, you could say that.
When the coach arrives in Rochester, the 4 members of the Pickwick Club go to the Bull Inn, but their friend takes cheaper lodgings next door. Mr. Pickwick is grateful to him for rescuing them from the fight with the cabman earlier in the day. He invites him to dinner.
Sir, you helped me when I was in difficulties this morning. I would like to show my thanks. Would you care to have dinner with us?
The stranger accepts the invitation and walks away with his luggage. A brown paper parcel is all that he has with him. He explains that the rest of his luggage is too heavy to carry and is coming to Rochester by boat.
Luggage? Haven't got any. Not with me. Brown paper parcel here, that's all. Rest gone by water. Huge packing cases piled up, big as houses. Heavy, damned heavy. Couldn't possibly carry it all with me.
When the young man and the members of the Pickwick Club meet later for dinner at the Bull Inn, they see preparations for a ball, a formal party with dancing. Mr. Tupman wants to go to the ball and meet some pretty girls, but the only other member of the party who is interested is the thin young man. He and Mr. Tupman decide to go together. Now let's return to Mr. Pickwick and his friends. It's 5 o'clock at the Bull Inn.
Punctually at 5, the stranger arrived at the inn for dinner. He had left behind the brown paper parcel, but otherwise had made no alteration to his clothing and looked just as shabby and travel-stained as before.
Glass of wine, Mr. Pickwick?
With pleasure.
Me too. Waiter, wine, please.
Very good, sir.
Pour it for everyone, will you, waiter?
Yes, sir.
Chairs and tables and glasses being taken up the staircase, waiter. Preparations for something?
A ball, sir, for the benefit of charity, sir. Tickets at the bar, sir. Half a guinea each, sir.
How I should like to go.
So should I, Tupman.
Many fine women in this town, do you know, sir?
Many. All beautiful. Town famous for pretty women.
How I should like to go to that ball. How I should like to go.
At intervals throughout the meal, Mr. Tupman kept repeating this phrase. But soon the other members of the Pickwick Club stopped noticing, for they had all drunk so much wine that they had fallen fast asleep.
Oh, damned luggage. Pity I didn't bring it. No clothes to change into. Go with you to the ball, otherwise.
Would you?
Of course.
You could borrow some evening clothes of mine, but you are rather slim, and I am...
Rather fat. Pass the wine.
I was going to say, sir, that though my clothing might be too large, Mr. Winkle's would perhaps fit you better.
Ah, yes. Just the thing.
Then that's what we'll do. You can wear his dress suit. But we won't wake him up and tell him. He wouldn't be able to understand at the moment. We'll just borrow his clothes from his room. You can wear them to the ball, and we'll put them back in his luggage without bothering him.
Capital. Excellent plan. Strange, though. 14 coats in my packing cases, but have to borrow another man's. Odd, that. Very.
So, leaving the other Pickwickians gently sleeping, Mr. Tupman and the stranger crept away and prepared themselves for that evening's visit to the ball.
Coat, excellent. Fits perfectly. Bright blue. Silver buttons. Odd design. Coat like a uniform. Postman?
It's a new coat, especially designed for the members of the Pickwick Club. The silver buttons have a special design. Mr. Pickwick's face with the letters P.C. on either side.
P.C. The old fellow's face and P.C. Now, what does P.C. stand for? Peculiar coat, eh?
No, sir. P.C. stands for Pickwick Club.
Ah, yes. Sorry. Mistake. Well, we'd better be off now, otherwise miss the fun.
The ball took place in a long room with red-covered benches and wax candles in chandeliers. At first, Tupman and the stranger stood in a corner and watched.
Charming women.
Some of them, yes.
The cream of local society, one supposes.
Cream, yes. Gone sour, some of it. Can't be helped, though.
There appear to be a lot of military men present.
Soldiers, yes. Officers. Stationed here. Local garrison. Soldiers attractive to women. Very.
That officer certainly seems to be very popular.
Which?
The one over there, the person who laughed. Fat gentleman. Bald on top.
Bald fellow? Talking to the little old lady?
That's the one.
Pompous doctor. After the old girl's money.
After her money? How do you know she's got any? Do you know her?
Never saw her before in all my life. Can tell she's rich from her clothes. Diamonds, rings, necklaces, lots of money. Widow, probably. Got an idea. I'll dance with her, cut out the doctor. Good fun. Here goes.
The stranger crossed the room and, leaning against the mantelpiece, began staring into the old lady's face with a look of adoration. Mr. Tupman watched in astonishment. In no time at all, the stranger managed to get an introduction to the old lady and began dancing with her. He had made an immediate conquest. But his success was to have unforeseen consequences.
Being the story of Mr. Samuel Pickwick, his friends, his travels, and his adventures. Episode 3, Mr. Winkle in Trouble.
The stranger had quite easily taken the little old lady away from the fat little doctor and danced with her all evening. But unfortunately, the doctor was not at all pleased. In fact, he was extremely annoyed. And when at the end of the ball the old lady had gone home, he strode up to the stranger and spoke to him angrily.
Sir, my name is Slammer. Dr. Slammer, sir. I'm a soldier, sir. 97th Regiment. My card, sir.
Ah, Dr. Slammer. Much obliged. You're not ill now, Slammer, but when I am, we'll call on you. I'll keep the card, thank you.
What?
I think he wants you to fight a duel with him.
Duel, Tupman? Must have drunk too much. Very foolish, very. Lemonade, much better. Elderly gentlemen suffer for it in the morning.
Are you going to give me your card, sir, or not?
No. Won't fight duel. Don't wish to harm you.
You're a coward, sir. Will nothing make you give me your card?
No.
You are stopping at this inn, sir. You are drunk now, sir, but you shall hear from me in the morning, sir. I shall find you out, sir. I shall find you out.
Rather you found me out than found me at home. Good night, sir.
The following morning at 7 o'clock, Mr. Pickwick was suddenly awakened by a loud knocking on his door.
Who's there?
Boot boy, sir.
What do you want? My shoes are outside the door if you wish to clean them.
No, sir. Please, sir. Can you tell me which gentleman of your party wears a bright blue dress coat with a silver button with PC on it?
PC? Pickwick Club. It must be Winkle's coat he's talking about. Mr. Winkle is the gentleman you want. Next room but 2, on the right-hand side.
Thank you, sir.
What's the matter?
Mr. Winkle, sir.
Yes?
You're wanted, sir. Downstairs.
Wanted? Who on earth can want me? I don't know anybody here. Except my travelling companions, of course.
A military gentleman in the coffee room, sir. Says he won't keep you long.
So will you? How odd.
I'll be down directly.
Very good, sir.
Winkle hurriedly wrapped himself in a travelling shawl and a dressing gown and went downstairs. An army officer was waiting for him.
Mr. Winkle, I presume.
Yes, my name is Winkle, sir.
I am Lieutenant Tappleton. You will not be surprised when I tell you that I'm calling on behalf of my friend, Dr. Slammer.
Dr. Slammer?
Dr. Slammer. He wishes me to tell you that he is of the opinion that your behavior towards him last night was disgraceful.
What?
In the circumstances, his honor must be satisfied. Would you like to choose your weapons? Swords or pistols?
Swords or pistols? A duel, you mean?
Yes, sir. A duel.
Are you sure you brought the right man?
Your name is Winkle, is it not?
Yes.
And you wear a blue dress coat with silver buttons on which there is a picture of an elderly gentleman and the letters PC?
Yes, I do wear that coat.
Then you are the man. You insulted my friend Dr. Slammer last night and refused to give your name.
I can remember no such thing. In fact, I can remember nothing of what happened last night. I'm afraid we had a number of bottles of wine at dinner, and I became somewhat
drunk.
Intoxicated. I must have changed my coat, gone somewhere, and insulted somebody. I have no doubt that must be the explanation.
Will you give me the name of somebody who can act as your second, so that we can arrange the time and place for the duel?
Quite unnecessary. Name them to me, and I will get a friend to act as a second later.
Shall we say sunset this evening?
Very good.
You know Fort Pitt?
Yes.
I will meet you there and take you to a field nearby. It is a secluded place, and there's no fear of interruption. Now, there's nothing more to arrange except the weapons. Will pistol suit?
Yes, I suppose so.
Excellent. That is all, then. Good morning.
Good morning. What have I done?
Mr. Winkle has been challenged to a duel, a fight, all because of a mistake. Their new friend, the thin young gentleman, has been wearing Mr. Winkle's coat. The thin young man and Mr. Tupman went to a ball, and having nothing suitable to wear, the thin young gentleman borrowed Mr. Winkle's coat, a bright blue coat with silver buttons. At the ball, the thin young man, as a joke, has chatted to a little old lady and danced with her all evening, taking her away from the army doctor who wants to become friendly with her. The army doctor is very angry about this. After the little old lady has gone home, he speaks to the thin young man about it and gives the young man his card, a card with his name and regiment on it.
My name is Slammer. Dr. Slammer, sir. I'm a soldier, sir. My card, sir.
Dr. Slammer wants to fight a duel, but the stranger will not fight.
No, won't fight duel. Don't wish to harm you.
But Dr. Slammer is persistent. He says he will contact the thin young man in the morning.
You are drunk now, sir, but you shall hear from me in the morning.
And in the morning, Dr. Slammer sends his friend, Lieutenant Tappleton, to find the man who was wearing the bright blue coat with the silver buttons. The coat is now back in Mr. Winkle's room. So, by mistake, Dr. Slammer's challenge is delivered to Mr. Winkle. Lieutenant Tappleton doesn't know that he is talking to the wrong man, and Mr. Winkle can't remember anything about the previous night because he drank rather a lot and then fell asleep.
I can remember nothing of what happened last night. I must have changed my coat, gone somewhere, and insulted somebody.
Mr. Winkle assumes that he was so drunk that he went out and insulted someone without knowing it. The duel, which is to be a fight with pistols, is arranged for that evening at sunset. Lieutenant Tappleton names a secluded place, a quiet, private place where they will not be interrupted. Mr. Winkle agrees to all this, as he doesn't know what else to do. If he refuses to fight the duel, the others will think he is a coward. Then he has to find a second, a friend, to help him prepare for the duel. He decides to ask Mr. Snodgrass to be his second.
All I want is your help in an affair of honor.
A duel, eh? How exciting. You shall certainly have my help.
Mr. Winkle asks Mr. Snodgrass to keep the matter secret.
Can I rely upon your secrecy?
Mr. Snodgrass agrees. But in fact, Mr. Winkle really doesn't want Mr. Snodgrass to keep the matter secret. He really wants Mr. Snodgrass to tell the police, who will then stop the duel. He tries to put this idea into Mr. Snodgrass's head, but Mr. Snodgrass will not take the hint.
The last thing Mr. Winkle wanted to do was fight a duel. He was a very poor shot with a pistol and was extremely afraid. But he could not withdraw. What would the other Pickwickians think of him if he did? Winkle suddenly remembered something the officer had said.
It is a secluded place, and there's no fear of interruption.
No fear of interruption. But what if we were interrupted by officers? They would certainly put a stop to the duel, and my life would no longer be in danger. But I can't be the one to inform them. That would look too much like cowardice. Snodgrass might, though. I'll see if I can put the idea into his head.
So after breakfast, Winkle asked Snodgrass to come for a walk with him.
Snodgrass? Yes? Can I rely upon your secrecy?
Secrecy? Of course. I'll swear it if you like. I swear.
No, don't swear. It's quite unnecessary. All I want is your help in an affair of honor.
A duel, eh? How exciting. You shall certainly have my help. But who's the other man?
A doctor. Dr. Slammer. He's an army officer. His second visited me this morning.
Then I shall be your second, my dear fellow.
The consequences may be dreadful.
I hope not.
The doctor, I believe, is a very good shot.
Most of these military men are. But so are you, aren't you?
Yes.
That's all right, then.
But if I die...
Yes?
You may find yourself in trouble.
Oh? Why?
Duels are against the law. As my second, you'll be involved in committing a crime. It's possible you may find yourself arrested and put on trial. You may even be sent to prison, possibly for life.
Might I? Oh. Well, in the cause of friendship, I'm prepared to brave all dangers.
Snodgrass, do not try to stop me fighting this duel. Do not report the matter. Do not get the help of several officers to arrest Dr. Slammer of the 97th Regiment, at present living in the Army Barracks, Chatham, and thus prevent the duel.
I say, do not. Do not. Don't worry, old fellow. I won't. Not for worlds. Oh.
That evening, at the appointed time, the two friends set off for Fort Pitt.
We're in good time. The sun is just going down. Have you got everything? Oh, everything. Plenty of ammunition in case the shots don't take effect. Look, there's the lieutenant. Where? Over there. The gentleman in the blue cloak. Look, he wants us to follow him. Oh, yes, look over there. There are two people waiting. Dr. Slammer, I suppose, and... Who's the other gentleman? A surgeon, I suppose. Here to give medical help if either of you is hurt. For if a ball from his pistol were to hit you, it could make an extremely unpleasant wound. The shoulder is the best place to be hit. But I heard of one fellow who had his ear blown off. Care for a drop of brandy? Just a drop. Just a drop. Thank you. Oh, steady. Your notion of a swing is somewhat larger than mine.
Ah, Mr. Winkle. Is this your second, sir?
Yes, Lieutenant. My friend, Mr. Snodgrass.
We have nothing further to say, I think. Shall we begin?
Certainly.
Are your pistols loaded?
I'm not sure. Does the ball go down the barrel of the gun first, or is it the powder?
Perhaps you'd better use one of my pistols. They're already loaded. Do you object to using them?
Certainly not.
You are, then. We may now place our men, I think.
Yes. Yes, I think we may. Would you like to give me your cloak, Winkle? If you don't, I think it may tangle up with your pistol.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Don't kill him, Winkle, old fellow. Just wing him.
Good advice. If only I knew how to do it.
Here's your pistol. Good luck.
Snodgrass and Dr. Slammer now took up their positions. The duel was about to begin.
Hay fever. Phantom of the...
Winkle has been challenged to a duel by an army officer called Dr. Slammer. Winkle is terrified, for though he has a reputation as a sportsman, he knows nothing whatsoever about guns or duels.
The Pickwick Papers, being the story of Mr. Samuel Pickwick, his friends, his travels, and his adventures. Episode 4, The Duel.
Dr. Slammer and Mr. Winkle faced one another, their pistols in their hands. Mr. Snodgrass stood watching, waiting for Lieutenant Tappleton to start the proceedings. He noticed that Winkle had closed his eyes.
How odd. Aiming a pistol with your eyes closed must be rather difficult. Still, Winkle is an experienced shot. He must know what he's doing. Perhaps he doesn't wish to see the wound he is about to inflict on Dr. Slammer.
Are you ready, Dr. Slammer?
Yes?
Are you ready, Mr. Winkle?
Yes?
Gentlemen, I will remind you of the rules of this duel. You are at this moment standing at a distance from each other of 40 paces. You will see that two sabers have been stuck into the ground 10 paces apart. Those two swords represent a barrier, and you must stop when you reach them. When I give the order, you will start to walk towards that barrier. You may fire at any time before reaching it. Now, raise your pistols, and at the word 3, begin to walk. 1, 2, 3.
Eh? Wait a minute.
Stop!
Stop! That's not the man.
Not the man? Not the man?
Certainly not. That's not the man who insulted me last night. Now I can see him clearly. I know he's not the man. The person who insulted me last night was quite different. He was taller and thinner. Quite different.
How very extraordinary.
Yes. Well, we shall now have to call off the duel.
Call it off, you say?
Yes, of course, Mr. Winkle. Dr. Slammer can't fight the wrong man. Wouldn't be honourable. I suppose you really are the wrong man?
Yes, quite the wrong man. In fact, I've known all along that I was the wrong man.
Then why did you not tell me before?
Yes.
Why did you not tell us?
Why didn't I tell you? Because of the insult to the coat I had the honour to wear.
The coat?
Yes, Dr. Slammer. The coat which is the uniform of the Pickwick Club. As a soldier, sir, you would defend the honour of your uniform. So do I mine. I was accused of being drunk whilst wearing that uniform. That insult had to be answered.
My dear sir, allow me to say that I understand your feelings perfectly. I honour your conduct and your bravery. I'm sorry that I've been the cause of this unhappy affair.
Please don't mention it.
I should feel proud if you would allow me to be your friend, sir.
I shall be happy to know you, sir.
Then give me your hand.
There, sir.
Since it is obvious that there will now be no duel, I think we may as well adjourn. Certainly, Tappleton. I think we may. Unless Mr. Winkle feels he must fight, for his honour's sake.
No, I don't think so. Not necessary.
Then I suppose we'd better put the pistols away in their cases and go home.
Yes. I suppose we had.
Are you staying in Rochester long, Mr. Winkle?
I think we shall be leaving here the day after tomorrow. We shall be going on to Dingley Dell. One of the members of our club, Mr. Tupman, has some friends there.
I hope I shall have the pleasure of seeing you and your friends before you leave. Are you free later this evening?
I think so, yes. Perhaps you and Lieutenant Tappleton would like to join us at the Bull Inn.
With great pleasure. Would 10 o'clock be too late?
No, I don't think so. If you come at that time, I shall be most happy to introduce you to my friends, Mr. Pickwick and Mr. Tupman.
It will give me great pleasure, I am sure.
You will be sure to come.
Oh, certainly, certainly.
At 10 o'clock that night, the 4 members of the Pickwick Club sat in front of the inn fire drinking brandy and water, awaiting the arrival of the 2 soldiers. With the Pickwickians was the tall, thin young man they had met on their way down to Rochester. Since Mr. Pickwick was curious to know more of this stranger, he asked him what his profession was.
My profession, sir? Behind the footlights, sir. Actor, sir.
How interesting. Oh, what sort of parts do you play?
Romantic, mostly. Tragic, sometimes. Audiences in floods of tears. Ladies' handkerchiefs quite damp. Talented performer, sir. Very.
There you are, Mr. Winkle.
Oh, Dr. Slammer, Lieutenant Tappleton. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, you've met Mr. Snodgrass, of course. Dr. Slammer, Mr. Pickwick. Lieutenant Tappleton, Mr. Pickwick. Dr. Slammer, Mr. Tupman. Lieutenant Tappleton.
Tupman, eh? Well, I have met Mr. Tupman before.
Yes, last night, at the ball. Strong feelings could be seen on Dr. Slammer's face. But before he could say anything further, he noticed the stranger in the green coat. The doctor had obviously been very angry with Mr. Tupman, but that anger was nothing when compared to his feelings about the stranger. In fact, the effect on Dr. Slammer was quite extraordinary.
Dr. Slammer has had a very surprising evening, and so has Mr. Winkle. First of all, Mr. Winkle goes to meet Dr. Slammer, who, because of a mistake, has challenged him to a duel. Luckily, the duel is avoided at the last moment. Just as he is about to fire, Dr. Slammer sees Mr. Winkle clearly for the first time and realizes that he is about to shoot at the wrong man.
Stop! That's not the man. The person who insulted me last night was quite different. He was taller and thinner. Quite different.
When Mr. Winkle is asked why he did not explain this earlier, he sees a chance to increase his reputation for bravery and invents a reason. He says he was defending the honor of the Pickwick Club.
Why didn't I tell you? Because of the insult to the coat I have the honor to wear. The coat which is the uniform of the Pickwick Club.
He explains to Dr. Slammer.
As a soldier, sir, you would defend the honor of your uniform. So do I mine. I was accused of being drunk whilst wearing that uniform. That insult had to be answered.
This explanation is accepted by Dr. Slammer.
My dear sir, allow me to say that I understand your feelings perfectly.
He is impressed by Winkle's behavior and thinks he is a brave man.
I honor your conduct and your bravery.
So the incident ends happily. The men shake hands, and Lieutenant Tappleton suggests that they bring the meeting to an end.
Since it is obvious that there will now be no duel, I think we may as well adjourn.
So they pack up their belongings and set off back to the town. On the way, Mr. Winkle invites Dr. Slammer and Lieutenant Tappleton to join them at the Bull Inn that evening. They accept the invitation. That evening, before the soldiers arrive, the members of the Pickwick Club and their new friend, the thin young man, are sitting by the fire at the inn. Questioned about his profession, the young man says that he is an actor.
My profession, sir? Behind the footlights, sir. Actor, sir.
How interesting. What sort of parts do you play?
Romantic, mostly. Tragic, sometimes. Audiences in floods of tears. Ladies' handkerchiefs quite damp. Talented performer, sir. Very.
Then Dr. Slammer and Lieutenant Tappleton arrive. When he is introduced to Mr. Winkle's friends, Dr. Slammer recognizes Mr. Tupman, who was at the ball. And then he sees the man who was with Mr. Tupman at the ball, the man he has been looking for, the man who insulted him, the thin young man in the green coat.
Dr. Slammer's face became purple with rage, and sweat appeared on his bald head. He spoke to the stranger.
I have met you too, sir.
Me?
Yes, sir, you. You insulted me at the ball last night. As a result, I challenged Mr. Winkle to a duel by mistake. But we have now met again, sir, and I say to you once more, will you accept my challenge? Or shall I be forced to set about you with my fists here and now?
One moment, Slammer. I want to ask this fellow a question.
A question?
Yes. A very important question. The answer may well affect your conduct in this affair.
Oh, very well, ask him, but be quick.
The question is this, sir. Haven't I seen you at the theatre, sir? Certainly. Performed here often. I thought so. You hear that, Slammer? The fellow is an actor.
An actor?
Quite. Performing in a play at the Rochester Theatre tomorrow night. Care to come? Tickets quite cheap.
An actor? Ugh, disgraceful.
Slammer, you obviously cannot go on with this affair. It's impossible. No officer or gentleman would condescend to fight a duel with an actor.
Quite.
Mr. Pickwick, I'm sorry to have placed you in this disagreeable situation. And allow me to suggest that in future you are more careful in your choice of companions.
What?
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How dare they tell me who I should associate with? How dare they? Come back! I shall fight a duel with you both! Come back! Come back!
No, restrain him, somebody! Tupman, Winkle!
Stop him! Now, I will fight with them, I tell you!
No, Mr. Pickwick, no! Tupman, hold on to his coat!
Let me go, Tupman!
Mr. Pickwick, calm down, I beg you. Do not upset yourself, Mr. Pickwick. They are not worth your anger.
Brave old gentleman. Lots of courage, but discretion the better part of valor. Drink a brandy and water instead. Here you are. Swallow this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're quite right, my friends. They're not worth my anger. I'm sorry that I allowed them to upset me. I apologize.
The rest of the evening passed very pleasantly. The next day, the Pickwickians said goodbye to the stranger and spent the rest of their stay in Rochester looking at the local sights. The day after that was the one fixed for their journey to their next stopping place, Dingley Dell.
And we'll discover what lies ahead at Dingley Dell when the Pickwick Papers continues at the same time next week.
Pop music has given us some of the world's great